This is one of the most devastating weapons in our arsenal today, and a lot of people get very confused about it. Damn thing's got tracks like a tank. Got a big-ass gun like a tank. Looks, feels, even smells like a tank, but it's not. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what is it? It's a butt-kicking Bradley, an armored fighting vehicle. And it's different from a tank like this Abrams. You see, the tank's main job is to spearhead an attack ahead of advancing infantry. Armored fighting vehicles are designed to get to troops where they're needed, so they can go in and finish the job.
War is such that the supreme consideration is speed. This is to take advantage of what is beyond the reach of the enemy, to go by way of routes where he least expects you, and to attack where he has made no preparations. Sun Tzu, 4th century BC. And he knew a little bit about warfare. I've been saying in this project from the beginning, mobility, mobility, mobility. Only in science fiction do military forces go consistently on foot with pistols. Okay, the vehicle is very, very important in a modern mechanized military. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say there's Attila the Hun with his primitive weapons, bows and arrows, spears, that kind of thing, on a horse. And then there's another guy over here standing on foot with a ray pistol. Now, which one of these guys has the advantage? Well, everybody would instantly say, well, the guy with a ray gun, you know, he can shoot the guy off the horse, he can shoot the horse out from under him. But that goes back to the head-to-head comparison. Everybody thinks about these things in terms of head-to-head comparisons, but that's not the case. The guy with a ray pistol can only be effective if he's defending himself, if he's the target. The guy on horseback is attacking him. He can defend himself. But what if he's not the objective? What if the objective is practically anything else, anywhere on the continent? Okay, the guy on the horse has the advantage. Okay, because he can go on the offensive. He has the mobility of a horse. He can go 100 miles and attack the enemy. And it doesn't matter that much that he has primitive weapons. If he hits one guy with one arrow, he's done more than the guy on foot that's 100 miles away can ever do. So I've been saying since the beginning of this project that to me, the most important thing is not what kind of weapons you have, but the ability to deploy those weapons against the enemy. Because if you can't move effectively, you can't go on the offensive. And you're not a threat to anybody if you can't move it. So the ability to move your weapons from place to place is far more important than what kind of weapons you have. In World War II, one of the key factors in the Allies winning the war was a Studebaker truck. Seriously, when the Germans invaded Russia, they were accustomed to moving things around on horseback or pulling behind a horse with a wagon. But the Studebaker truck, made in America, was sent over on a Lend-Lease program, and that allowed the Russians to move their artillery and their people as effectively as the Germans could move their people. And that allowed them to set up a sound defense. So having a transport of some kind is the most important part, being able to move your people and equipment from place to place. But there are some vehicles that are armored and armed for combat, that not only can they transport the troops, but once they get there, they can hang around and support the troops. Well, why would you need vehicle support for the ground troops? Where's my pistol? No, seriously, you wouldn't want to be in that field, okay? Vehicles, simply put, can carry heavier and more weapons than a human being can, and they can lay down more fire. Tanks, though, don't carry troops, just the tank crew, unless they want to ride on the top and they wouldn't be protected. So enter the APC, AFV, or IFV. That's Armored Personnel Carrier, Armored Fighting Vehicle, or Infantry Fighting Vehicle. Now, military people would point out differences between these things, but for our purposes, we're looking for a concept, not a trivia contest. Now, to me, the difference between an M113 and a Bradley looks much smaller than the difference between an AT-AT and the Marines APC from Aliens. Now, this image is not necessarily to scale, but it's a reasonable approximation. Now, that looks like a lot more difference to me, but these things all perform the same basic functions. Transport troops, they protect them en route with armor, and then they have the firepower to give them heavy supporting fire once they get into combat. So considering that these things have a broad range of capabilities, everything from just mounting a machine gun to something like an AT-AT that I can't even think of a tank that could take on an AT-AT, we'll consider these one broad category, and we'll consider the terms interchangeable. APC, AFV, or IFV. I generally say APC because it's easier to say, and that's what Hudson said in Aliens, but we'll consider it one category for our purposes here. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about transports in general and helicopters briefly, but mainly the advantages that this category vehicle provides with armor protection and heavy firepower. So let's get to it.
Hey, you! That's right! You stupid crowd bastards! That's right! Say hello to Ford and General Motors! You stupid fascist pigs! Look at you!
I've been saying since the beginning of this project that logistics is the most important thing, and trucks, those big trucks like that, they call deuce and a half because it's 2.5 ton truck. But trucks and Jeeps and Humvees and things like that transport the vast majority of equipment, supplies, and people from place to place. And if you don't have trucks or comparable transport to move things from place to place, you don't have an army. They have limitations, though. To use a truck, you need roads. They're not very good at going across country. You have to follow the road, and they don't provide covering fire. You can technically mount a gun on a truck, but typically they don't provide any covering fire or armor protection or anything like that. They're not made for combat. So what if you have to go cross country to get to the enemy? Or what if you have to go cross country to outflank the enemy? Or what if you expect to be in heavy combat and you need armor protection and supporting fire? The truck's not the way to go. Some people call infantry being moved from place to place by truck motorized infantry. But troops that are being moved by and use armored fighting vehicles are called mechanized infantry. And they protect the troops by covering fire and armor protection. This category, like when we covered in tanks, has a lot of trade-offs of different factors you have to balance. Armor, firepower, speed, terrain mobility, logistics as far as economy, the expense of building it, expense of maintaining it, ease of transporting it from place to place, and of course, troop carrying capacity.
In an era of fly-by-wire attack jets and precision-guided munitions, unprotected infantrymen are especially vulnerable. Yet their role on the ground is as vital as ever. Today they ride into battle protected by vehicles as sophisticated as anything they might face on the modern battlefield. When tanks first appeared on the battlefields of World War I, they were lumbering, slow machines. By the end of that war, military strategists had learned that tanks were at their most effective when they were supported by attached infantry units. During the 1920s and 30s, the speed of tanks increased dramatically. Newer tanks raced across rough terrain at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, nearly 10 times faster than infantry could maneuver. A solution was needed to keep the infantry with the tanks at the front of the battle. Trucks were a possibility. However, they offered no armored protection and could only travel effectively on roads. For infantry combat, more capable vehicles were needed to carry out what is called today combined arms tactics.
The capabilities of faster tanks became more and more preponderant during the 1920s and 1930s, and then we see the development of vehicles that can keep infantry under armor and up with those tanks as they go deep into the enemy's rear.
The combined use of tanks, infantry, and artillery was first seen in the Second World War, with the deployment of infantry combat vehicles such as the U.S. Army's M3 half-track. Its rear track assembly gave it better mobility than trucks using wheels alone. And its light armor protected the infantry squad inside from enemy small arms fire. It also gave added firepower to the infantry squad by adding a .50 caliber machine gun. However, it provided no overhead armor protection, since the added weight would have been too great a burden for the vehicle. The infantry fighting vehicle evolved slowly after the war. The Soviet BTR-152 of the early 1950s was little better than the wartime half-tracks, essentially a truck with armor plating. But tank technology was moving ahead faster than vehicles like these. Clearly, additional armor and mobility was needed. In the 1960s, a new generation of infantry vehicles emerged, called APCs, or Armored Personnel Carriers. The U.S. Army's M113 was typical of this type of vehicle. These fully tracked vehicles had greater mobility than half-tracked vehicles, and provided the troops the security of full armor protection.
Going to the full track gave them a much better off-road capability than the half-track design did. And let's face it, with full track versus half-track, on-road you really don't have that much difference in capability. With the wheel, you're subject to tires getting punctured and to the fact that you're going to have less off-road capability without the full track.
The M113 was the first modern battle taxi, developed to transport infantry forces into combat in concert with the battle tanks. Once in position, the infantry would dismount and fight on foot. The M113 family of vehicles is the most widely produced American armored vehicle of all time, with over 80,000 manufactured. It is used not simply for transporting infantry. The M113 has had more than 40 major variants, and with over a dozen still in use, M113s continue to serve in many combat support roles, such as its use as an ambulance to carry wounded troops away from the front. The M113 is also used as a tank hunting vehicle, armed with the TOW missile. The most recent variant has its TOW missiles mounted in a special armored launcher, so that the crew stays protected within the hull of the vehicle. When ready to fire, the missile launcher can be elevated above the roof, allowing the crew to position the vehicle behind a hill for further protection. The M113 has been widely exported around the world, serving in over 50 countries. In the 1991 Gulf War, the M113 not only served with the U.S. Army, but with the armies of other coalition forces, including the Egyptian and Saudi armies. The M113 is built of aircraft-quality aluminum, which has the strength of steel, but a much lighter weight. Its light weight permits a relatively small engine to power the vehicle while transporting a large payload cross-country.
This baby ate rice patties for breakfast. Now that's at least a foot of mud and a foot of water. And as Staff Sergeant Ian Brown explains, it could handle much deeper water than that.
When these tracks are moved by the driver by giving it gas, they actually create propulsion in the water. So while this vehicle is floating, this is the means that it goes forward in the water. And it can travel at about 3.5 miles per hour in the water.
So we no longer need that combat bridge. We don't have to call the engineers anymore. We just drive right on through the river.
You got it.
The most challenging requirement for infantry vehicles comes from Marine units, with their need of transport across terrain as well as water. The U.S. Marine Corps pioneered amphibious infantry vehicles, which they called Amtraks. In the 1970s, they developed the Amphibious Assault Vehicle 7, which has undergone continual modification. It is larger than the M113, since greater size means increased buoyancy. The AAV-7 easily floats even in heavy surf conditions. Its propulsion in water comes from water jets located at the rear of the vehicle. On land, it relies on conventional tracks. The AAV-7 provides great armored protection to Marines during amphibious assaults. But with a top speed of 7 knots in the water, it leaves the vehicle vulnerable to enemy attack for extended periods. And its 20 miles per hour land speed does not allow it to keep up with the Abrams main battle tank. The U.S. Marine Corps developed a novel solution in its new Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle, or EFV. This advanced amphibious assault vehicle utilizes a bow plane positioned at the front, which causes the 30-ton vehicle to rise out of the water as if on water skis. Skirts at the side of the vehicle can be lowered to cover the tracks to eliminate a major source of drag. With a powerful turbine engine, speeds of well over 20 knots can be achieved, even in rough surf. And it can cruise at over 30 miles per hour on land. Not only is the EFV faster on land and in water than the AAV-7, but it also has better armored protection, making it the battle taxi of choice for the U.S. Marines. In the mid-1960s, a new approach to infantry vehicles began to emerge. The Soviet Army, convinced that modern land warfare might involve nuclear weapons, began designing an infantry vehicle that would allow the troops to fight from within the vehicle rather than merely being transported to the front. While armored infantry vehicles of the day offered limited protection from the hazards of radiation and blasts, the troops were incapable of fighting from inside these vehicles. Firing ports were added, and the vehicles themselves were fitted with weapons, such as low-pressure guns or anti-tank guided missiles. The Soviet BMP-1 was the first of these new infantry fighting vehicles, or IFVs. In the mid-1960s, the German army began development of the Marder. Like the BMP, the Marder allowed the crew to fight from within. The Marder is heavier than the BMP, and so it cannot swim. Instead, the designers fitted it with a retractable snorkel that allows it to wade across rivers. Like most infantry fighting vehicles, the Marder is cramped and noisy inside. Infantrymen appreciate the armor protection that such vehicles offer, but they exit the vehicle with some relief. In the early 1970s, the United States Army began searching for its own infantry fighting vehicle. FMC Corporation developed enhanced versions of its successful M113. These had a turret as well as firing ports for the troops. Although such a vehicle had distinct advantages over the older M113, it was still not enough for the U.S. Army. By the late 70s, the Army sought an armored troop transporter capable of keeping pace with their new M1 Abrams tanks without sacrificing armored protection or offensive capability. In 1981, these needs were met with the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. The Bradley offered 3 critical improvements over the earlier M113. It was fast enough to keep up with the Abrams tank in combat conditions. It represented a fundamental leap forward in firepower, and it was more heavily armored than any previous infantry transporter. Unlike the M113 series it replaced, the Bradley is not simply a battle taxi. It is a sophisticated weapons platform capable of providing tremendous firepower and direct support of the infantry it carries. The 25mm Bushmaster cannon is stabilized, allowing it to be fired while the vehicle is moving. And the gunner can choose between high explosive and armored piercing rounds in single or multi-shot modes. In addition, the Bradley is fitted with a thermal imaging night sight, which allows it to fight day or night. An infantry squad in a Bradley has 7 men, 2 of them armed with squad machine guns and the rest with assault rifles. In addition, the squad can carry a Dragon anti-tank missile, as well as anti-tank rocket launchers. But the Bradley's most powerful weapon is its turret-mounted TOW missile launcher, capable of destroying nearly any tank on the modern battlefield. During the 1990s, Europe and the U.S. switched their attention from firepower to protection. Infantry vehicles, even the thickly armored Bradley, are still vulnerable to anti-tank weapons, such as rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank missiles.
Another one.
The real barrier to more heavily armored infantry vehicles is cost, not technology. Infantry vehicles, should they be armored as heavily as tanks, would cost as much as tanks. Yet improvements in infantry protection continue. The Bradley M2A2 adds additional armor to protect it against autocannon fire of other IFVs and enemy anti-armor weapons. Tracked vehicles are more complex and expensive to operate than wheeled vehicles. In some areas, such as in deserts, urban areas, or dry plains, the terrain is suitable for either type of vehicle. For economy's sake, many armies have adopted wheeled infantry vehicles. These have little in common with the wheeled armored vehicles of the Second World War, having much more sophisticated all-terrain features. A good example of this type of infantry vehicle is the South African Rottle infantry carrier. The Rottle operates in dry terrain where a wheeled vehicle layout is optimal. Mines have been one of the most common threats to South African armored vehicles. Therefore, the hull of the Rottle has been designed to better withstand mine damage than conventional armored vehicles. While the vehicle may be damaged beyond repair, this feature can significantly reduce casualties among the crew.
The armored body of the Caspier is designed to divert the explosive force of the mine away from the passenger compartment. You can clearly see the extensive damage caused by the mine, damage that would have destroyed a normal car or truck and killed its passengers. But in less than an hour, the Caspier was repaired. This type of vehicle is being used by United Nations peacekeeping forces.
2004, the MRAP. Carries 2 crew plus 6 to 10 troops. Speed, 65 miles an hour. Troop transports like Humvees and Jeeps have little, if any, armor underneath, making them vulnerable to mines and IEDs. The underside of these vehicles are riddled with pockets where the gas and blast waves of an explosion can be trapped and focused against the vehicle. The results can be deadly.
What happened was all the services started putting in a requirement to get armor put on their FMTVs, MTVRs, Humvees, and what we ended up getting to was the MRAP platform.
Now, these vehicles really are an engineering breakthrough. See, the MRAP has a smooth V-shaped hull. This not only acts like traditional armor, but the smooth sides stop the blast energy from getting trapped. And the V-shape deflects the shrapnel and blast energy out and away from the vehicle. And there's another feature on all MRAPs that helps the V-shaped hull to work.
All the vehicles are designed with a raised chassis, which gives you a better standoff from where the blast would explode. So you've got the standoff, and then as the blast explodes, that V-shaped hull allows that fragmentation and the blast to blast outwards.
Compare this to tracked vehicles like the M113 or the Bradley. They both set much closer to the ground, and their underbellies are flat, making them more vulnerable to an IED blast than an MRAP with its V-shaped hull.
The Piranhas could be armed with a variety of weapons, ranging from simple machine gun turrets to elaborate turrets with large caliber tank guns. The U.S. Marine Corps selected an 8-wheeled variant of the Piranha family, the LAV-25. The LAV-25 has a number of specialized variants. The LAV-AT is a tank hunter, fitted with a Hammerhead tow missile launcher for engaging hostile tanks. To provide fire support for the Marine units, there is a special mortar version armed with an 81mm mortar in the rear compartment. The Marines have also deployed an air defense variant. The LAV-AD's primary mission is to protect forward Marine units from low-altitude airborne threats. A secondary mission is to provide ground defense against light armored mechanized forces. The Blazer turret includes an infrared targeting sight, a laser rangefinder, and the option of employing either Stinger missiles or the rapid-fire GAU-12 25mm Gatling gun. The Marine Corps' interest in the LAV was closely tied to its traditional role in American overseas rapid deployment missions. These tasks require a special accent on mobility. The Marines sought a vehicle light enough to be airlifted, yet armed adequately to have an impact on the modern mechanized battlefield. A specific Marine requirement was that the LAV be light enough to be carried by CH-53E Super Stallions. The LAV also proved well suited for airdrop missions. It takes an impressive set of parachutes to land a 12-ton LAV safely.
That covers some of the advantages of this type of vehicle. Modern militaries are mechanized ones. They don't trudge across the mud on foot 1,000 miles across a country they're trying to invade. They beat it across the landscape at high speed in armored vehicles that provide armor protection and covering fire. And the most powerful ones provide offensive firepower comparable to tanks. Some of them can even cross terrain that's difficult to cross on foot, like the rice paddies, or even swim in the water. Some of them can be airlifted or even dropped out of the back of an airplane with parachutes. So let's apply some of these principles to science fiction and look at some of the trade-off. How does it balance these factors? It's no secret that I'm a fan of this design, the APC from Aliens. It does appear to be a very heavy design. It carried about 15 people down to LV-426, a platoon of Marines, 2 civilians, and an android, which I count to be something on the order of 15 people, so it has good troop carrying capacity. It appears to have very thick armored walls, and it is sloped in most areas, which would make it more effective. And of course, we did see it crash through some walls and doors and things like that, so it certainly has very good impact resilience. And a lot of people may wonder, well, is this advanced armor? But this is not the Earth Marines, it's the United States Marines, United States Colonial Marines. You can actually see the American flag here on its patch. And they do have particle beams and phased plasma pulse rifles, so they have advanced weapons, and they would probably be going up against similarly equipped opponents. So there is reason to believe that this is advanced armor, at least to some degree. Obviously, it emphasizes firepower with 2 turrets, one of them a particularly heavy turret, so that's a lot of firepower for an APC. Now, It does have wheels and tires, which suggest speed. And for those who don't know, wheels are the metal part and tires are the rubber part. And notice that the wheels are very large and the tires are low profile, which is typically associated with high performance street tires. And this vehicle did demonstrate good maneuverability, acceleration, and deceleration, even inside a building. Try that with an AT-AT. And I noticed that it is a low profile design. It's only a few inches off the ground, and there cannot possibly be much suspension travel here because there's only a few inches of space there. So it probably doesn't have very good terrain mobility. It would easily get stuck in the mud just due to the fact that the belly would sink and drag the ground, and it wouldn't have good travel over bumps or terraces. Again, do the same thing. The belly would drag the ground, and it wouldn't have good mine protection either, just due to being so low to the ground. As we saw there with the MRAPs, they stand tall. The belly may very well be strong, but a sufficiently powerful blast would flip the vehicle. So trade-offs for this design: it does have good street performance, or even indoors. It can go inside the facility as it did there in the movie. It has good troop carrying capacity, impressive armor, and impressive firepower, but it has poor terrain performance, poor protection from mines, and that's due to it being a low-profile design, but it's probably necessary for it to be a low-profile design so that it can fit inside the dropship. In this scene from the pilot episode of Buck Rogers, we see what's definitely an APC. It has impressive anti-personnel firepower. We saw plenty of that there. It is tracked, so it would be good over difficult terrain, and it carried about a half dozen troops or so. At least that many got out of it. We don't know much about the armor because we never saw return fire. We see here in the Battlestar Galactica 2003 episode Precipice, they have deuce and a halves. Not an alien vehicle that looks something like a deuce and a half, it's a deuce and a half. And of course, Starbuck had a Hummer. Not some alien vehicle that looked vaguely like a Hummer, it was a Hummer. And of course, that's very much like modern day vehicles. They do have transport from place to place, which is the most important thing, but they're just trucks. They aren't combat vehicles of any kind, and I don't recall having seen any combat vehicles on the ground throughout the series. Conversely, in these scenes from Battlestar Galactica 1978, we saw what they call the Land Ram, which is definitely an APC. It has definitely impressive anti-personnel firepower, but not only that, it shot down a Cylon Raider, and that was very impressive. Also, it looked like it took a hit from that Cylon Raider, which would mean it has very impressive armor as well. And it is fully tracked, which would mean it can handle difficult terrain very well. However, they had another vehicle there in the third clip that had an open top, and it would be more like a truck. It doesn't have any apparent combat capabilities. It is fully tracked, which would mean it can handle difficult terrain, but no apparent combat abilities from that, whereas the Land Ram was pretty impressive.
Man, I gotta start doing more cardio. All this back and forth is getting me winded. We couldn't have taken the jumper?
Oh, suck it up. It's not that bad. I have to hike this much almost every day.
In this scene from Stargate Atlantis episode Trio, we see Dr. Killer there getting a little winded because they're walking around on foot. And of course, in Stargate Atlantis, they do have the jumpers that they use to travel from place to place. It's made specifically to go through the gate, but that's an aircraft. Rarely in Stargate do they ever use any kind of ground vehicle. ATVs and things would fit through the Stargate, and it just doesn't make sense to me when you could do that while you'd walk around on foot. As far as I can recall, there were no APCs in Andromeda, no APCs in Babylon 5, no APCs in Firefly, no APCs in Flash Gordon, no APCs in Forbidden Planet, but they did have a utility vehicle they called a tractor, which looked kind of like a wrecker to me, tow truck, but it did have the ability to transport people from place to place. A small group of people had no apparent combat capabilities. It was a truck, okay? So no APCs, and no APCs in The Last Starfighter. And there were no APCs in Star Trek, but there were a couple of incidents that have been presented to me maybe half a dozen times that people say suggest APCs or maybe even tanks. So let's take a look at that.
All 4 mortar rounds right in the central compound, and the way they ran, it was like kicking over a mound of barrel bombs.
What was the count?
5 skimmers. And at least 15 Cardassian dead. Now that's not a bad day's work.
He stared at me for a long time before he decided I was big enough to carry a phaser rifle after all. So we set the ambush up along a ridge line at night and waited. I was so cold. My hands were shaking. I was so afraid. And one of them would look at me and think that I was nervous, and I kept biting my fingers to keep the blood flowing. We must have waited there 3 or 4 hours before the skimmer appeared, set down right where Pharrell said. And when that hatch opened and that first Cardassian appeared, I just started firing. And I didn't stop till I discharged the entire power cell. And it was all over. I was so relieved that I hadn't let anyone down. I was giddy. Pharrell told me to stop grinning, that it made me look younger, but I couldn't help it. I was one of them. I was in the resistance. Lupus had made me this out of some of the metal from that skimmer.
The Cardassian skimmer has been presented to me, like I said, maybe half a dozen times as an APC or maybe even a tank. But first of all, it's an aircraft. It's not a ground vehicle, it's an aircraft, so that would make it more comparable to a helicopter. So let's talk about how resilient it is. 4 mortar rounds took out 5 skimmers. So a mortar can destroy more than 1 skimmer. It doesn't have much armor protection. In another incident, they attacked it with phaser rifles. And apparently they destroyed it because Kira had a necklace that was made out of parts of the thing. So they must have destroyed it with their small arms. So if they can destroy it with small arms fire, it must not have much in the way of armor protection in that incident either. But the thing that stands out to me in that incident is Kira emptied her phaser rifle. And I don't know how many shots you can fire a phaser rifle before it's emptied, but it's implied to be a lot.
Drained 4 of our phasers and they still came. We killed thousands and they still came.
So that suggests the passage of some amount of time, and yet they walked away grinning, which would suggest they didn't take heavy casualties, which would further suggest this thing doesn't have significant covering fire. I mean, if you jump out and ambush a modern-day helicopter, they blow your head off with machine gun fire. You wouldn't walk away grinning like that. But now, if they planned it so that they shot the gunners first, well, it seems like the pilot would have time to raise shields or take off or whatever. Or if they shot the pilot first, he must not have much armor around him. Any way you look at it, this vehicle is very susceptible to infantry attack.
And according to a lieutenant I talked to, they've got so many transport scramblers online that we can't beam troops anywhere.
What about using hoppers?
Well, he says the Klingons have been shooting them out of the sky left and right.
You didn't see a crashed hopper around here, did you?
No.
They made it.
Who?
My platoon. The Klingons had us pinned down. We couldn't beam out because they had a transport scrambler running. We called for a hopper. As soon as it set down, the Klingons came after us. CO ordered me and Bryce to lay down cover so the squad could get up the ramp. By the time Bryce got in, the Klingons were practically on top of us. Hopper was taking such a pounding, I didn't think it'd make it off the ground.
We stayed behind on purpose so they could get away.
The Klingons were, quote, shooting them out of the sky left and right. Now, let's compare to the runabout, which they had on site and nobody bothered to use. Runabouts have shields that are capable of withstanding limited capital ship attack. But the Hopper gets shot down left and right by infantry on the ground. That doesn't make sense. It must not have shields, certainly not shields comparable to the runabout. And note that the dying soldier said that him and one other guy, so 2 infantrymen, were ordered to lay down covering fire so everybody could board the craft. This craft doesn't have its own covering fire. The 2 infantrymen were doing that, and one got left behind because he was still laying down covering fire. Both of these vehicles, the Skimmer and the Hopper, are extremely susceptible to infantry attack, whereas APCs and AFVs and things of that nature are designed and built specifically to defend from this kind of attack. So these definitely do not represent APCs. They're aircraft. They're more comparable to unarmed helicopters. Now that's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. It means that the Federation and the Cardassians have a backup plan for when the transporters aren't working. They can move their people from place to place. They have a little bit of foresight. They do have a backup plan, but it's certainly not a combat vehicle.
That armor's too strong for blaster.
Target, maximum firepower.
I covered AT-ATs in the tanks commentary, but it is an all-terrain armored transport, so it's an APC or an AFV. Even though I can't think of a tank that could match it, it is in this category, really. And it obviously emphasizes armor protection. You can't even shoot the windows out of it, and firepower. And there's lots of space to carry troops. Recall that the MRAP was mounted raised to protect from mines. Well, check this out. It is a walker, so it could handle, obviously, a lot of difficult terrain. But it's not very fast. Luke caught up with one running on his feet from behind, and obviously logistics would be in the basement. I mean, it's huge. It would be very expensive to build and difficult to move from place to place. The Empire has very strong logistics, perhaps the strongest of all the groups that I cover. That's the only reason they can handle it. A lot of lesser governments with lesser logistical ability probably couldn't handle it. Juggernaut as well we covered in the tanks commentary, but it does have the look of an APC. It does have wheels, so it emphasizes speed over terrain. On the other hand, it does have incredible suspension, and the wheels are very large, so it would be able to handle more terrain than most wheeled vehicles. It has moderate firepower, but it does have a wide variety of weapons. It doesn't have that much in the way of armor protection. We did see one destroyed by concentrated small arms fire, and it's very large, so the logistics would be difficult as far as building it and transporting it from place to place. At the time of this recording, the Rebels Season 1 hasn't been released to home video yet, but the Imperial troop transport that we see in Season 1, especially in Fighter Flight and Empire Day, was shown to have good speed, armor protection, and firepower. It withstood fire from TIE fighters, walkers, and the Phantom. In Star Wars, there seem to be 2 types of repulsor craft, those that actually fly and then those that just hover above the ground. And those that just hover, if you blow a bridge out from under them or something, they'll fall. But the same thing would happen to a walker, a track vehicle, or a wheel vehicle, so can it be really counted as a weakness? This is a very large APC, and it carries a lot of troops, and it does have some anti-personnel cannons in the front there, but to my knowledge, we never saw it fire or be fired upon, so we don't know much about its firepower or armor so far as I know. But it does carry a lot of troops, and it was just laying the trees over as it went. It is a repulsor craft, so it can handle a lot of terrain. And of course, they deployed them easily. They landed them there in the landing craft, and they just started coming out one after the other, so they handle the logistics with these well. So that's just a rundown of some of the advantages of using this type of vehicle and some of the trade-offs that they have in their designing, armor, firepower, speed, logistics, troop carrying capacity, things like that, and just a brief rundown of some of the ones that we see in the groups that I cover. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this commentary, and I'll see you next time.